Hello, everybody. It's just us today. No Ryan. Before we even get started, I feel like it's very important to say congratulations to the McLaughlin family. Ryan and Jessica gave, Jessica, I should say, not Ryan and Jessica, gave birth to beautiful Sophia today, the third of the McLaughlin clan. So, congrats to Ryan and Jessica.
Yeah.
Uh, today, of course, I have Brandon with me, the new co-host of Election 2020 miniseries.
What's up, y'all?
So yeah, we don't have as many topics, but the topics we have today are just as important. Over the weekend, we lost two greats of the civil rights movement, C.T. Vivian and also John Lewis. So I just before we even get into anything politics related, we got to talk about these two. So let's just discuss their legacy and basically everything they've done. So what does particularly John Lewis, like what does John Lewis mean to you, Brandon?
Wow, that's a really good question, tough question. I mean, what can you say about a man who devoted his entire life to, as he called it, getting into good trouble, right? I think his impact to the cause of equal justice is immeasurable, and we, this country and this world, really owe a debt of gratitude to this giant of a man. Um, for all our talk, I think, of perfecting our union, we often fall short, right? Leaders like John Lewis, though, reminded us constantly of the goals for which we claim to strive, right? And they hold us accountable. He was really, to me, the embodiment of the movement. He put his body on the line. I mean, we all know he suffered a fractured skull and almost died standing at the front of the march across the Edmund Pettus Bridge in Selma, which we all refer to as Bloody Sunday. As we know, this shocked the conscience of our nation. And led to the passage of the landmark 1965 Voting Rights Act. Right, he continued to fight for these causes as a member of Congress throughout his entire life. So talk about dedicating your life to the movement, man. It's a profound loss for our nation, for sure. But I think one important thing to note here, in 2013 in Shelby County versus Holder, ironic that it was also in Alabama,
Right.
the Supreme Court essentially gutted the Voting Rights Act. And if we want to honor Congressman Lewis, we should demand that the Senate take up and pass H.R. 4, which was introduced by my representative, Terry Sewell of Alabama, that will restore key provisions in the Voting Rights Act. And I think that's how we should honor John Lewis.
Yeah, because to me, to talk about what John Lewis means to me, of course, everybody knows about Bloody Sunday, but there are a lot of things you don't know about these people until you become of adult age or particularly reach college. So, right as I was having my, I guess, personal awakening as far as the world around me and how to make it better, I was learning more about John Lewis, and then I realized, like, hey, this guy was only 2 or 3 years older than I am right now. So here I am saying, I'm just this college student, I can't make a change, but this guy and along with organizations such as SNCC, they went out and they put boots on the ground and they made things happen. So I will say I do think he was pleased to see like this youthful uprising, this grassroots uprising before he passed. I'm glad he got to see that, and I also hope he passed with the knowledge that he is responsible for that. He and people like him are responsible for that. But like you mentioned, the ultimate basically the ultimate way to honor his legacy would be to restoring those voting rights. And to segue into our next point, we did have one minor victory this week. So so the ACLU of Alabama, they filed a complaint against Secretary of State John Merrill. So now we can vote absentee, no excuse. You mentioned this last week, so it's crazy that this happened. Like you mentioned, like the loop. I mean, basically every loop you have to jump through for absentee voting. So basically, Brendan, talk about what this means. Also, Why didn't John Merrill want this originally? So let's talk about this a bit.
Okay, I don't I don't know. It boggles the mind why John Merrill didn't want this originally. Um, I think you can point to this over the course of the history of this country when it comes to denying people the ballot, right? Um, in state after state, they've especially conservative states in the South have passed, and not just conservative states in the South, right? They've passed laws limiting people's ability to vote, and I think that's just partly in keeping with the fact that they know that demographically they're not going to win as things keep changing, as people keep as I guess demographics keep shifting. So that, I mean, that's I don't know his motivations. I can't really speak to his motivations, but that's the reason I think. But what this does though, formally you needed an excuse to cast an absentee ballot in the state, like being a student or in the armed forces or away from home at the having a physical illness, I think, and or being out of state on election day, right? All of those counted as excuses that would allow you to cast an absentee ballot. But now, thankfully, any qualified voter who quote determines it is impossible or unreasonable to vote at their polling location shall be eligible to select the box most appropriate to them, right? So if you prefer, basically what this means is that if you prefer to cast an absentee ballot on election day or prior to election day, you can do so without an excuse, period. But three things I think you need to realize here. You need to make sure you're registered to vote.
First.
You need to access you just can't vote by absentee ballot unless you request an absentee ballot online at the Secretary of State's website. You can request one by calling your absentee election manager's office, or you can contact the Secretary of State's office by phone, and I'll give you that number right now. It's 334-242-7210. 334-242-7210. You need to fill out the application and you need to submit it. And here's the real important part. Because Alabama is, in their efforts to suppress the vote, they passed a voter ID law. And so what you must include with your application is a copy of a valid photo ID issued by a governmental entity. So make sure you have those things before you cast the absentee ballot, or it will not be counted. Ron, or a few key dates I want to throw out there, if you don't mind.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
October 19th is the last day to register for the general election. October 29th is the last day to vote absentee for the general election, and November 3rd is general election day. So keep those dates top of mind as we proceed closer to the election.
So yeah, sticking along with that, I'm actually going to show everyone what the form looks like so we can talk about it a bit. Give me just 1 second. All right, so this is a sample of what the form looks like. The thing to make note of, what wasn't here prior, this section that says I have a physical illness or infirmity which prevents my attendance at the polls, that's what we're talking about. So you would need to send in a form of ID after you went through the process of requesting the form. Well, first, making sure you're registered to vote. That's what's important first and foremost, and then requesting this form. So yeah, that is the process. So that section right there, that's what we're talking about. So yeah, like I said, it'll be interesting to see how this all plays out, but I do think that is indeed a minor win for the state. It's not like we're in a case of emergency or in the middle of a pandemic or anything. Like it's insane that it had to come to this point. Like a complaint had to be filed against John Merrill, an amended complaint had to be filed. Like, hey, like what? So yeah, it's crazy that it came to that point, but here we are, and I do think it's a minor win.
Yeah, I agree with you. It boggles the mind why anyone wouldn't want, or why the people in charge of our electoral process in the state would want people getting sick or exposing themselves to this virus as we get or by doing what they are constitutionally allowed to do, which is a fundamental right within a democracy, right? And it's to cast a ballot, right? Like that should be the last thing on your mind. You should not have to get sick or even be exposed to the possibility of getting sick just to cast a ballot to vote. So.
Correct. You also mentioned one word there, fundamental rights, which a few of those may have been infringed upon this past weekend, which is a perfect segue to something I'm just having trouble grasping altogether. And what I want to mention now, so there were protests in Portland over the weekend, and protesters uploaded videos of fellow protesters being grabbed by unmarked law enforcement. No insignia, no name tags, no distinguishable marks on their uniforms. And now we have the Department of Homeland Security confirming that, yes, they did deploy a task force. And yes, they will take any measure possible to, quell these violent protests. Another loaded question for you, Brandon. Like, how does this make you feel as an American, especially when your right to protest and assembly is explicitly stated in our First Amendment? Like, how does this make you feel as an American?
Shitty, to say the least. Seriously, I mean, it's scary. It's scary. It's hard to put into words how un-American this really is, right? Mm-hmm. I think this is purely political. Him deploying what essentially are troops in American cities. I think after his failed attempt to control this pandemic, which has now, mind you, killed more than 140,000 Americans. So we can stop right there, right? I mean,
all right.
140,000 Americans gone. And his dwindling chance at re-election, if you believe the polls, Trump is really just resorting to these, I think, thinly veiled attempts to placate his members in his base who like seeing protesters or protests with which they disagree quashed in this manner, right? They have some kind of sick, twisted, I don't know what it is about it. It's so weird. But I think Oregon's congressional delegation put it best. They wrote a letter to Attorney General Barr, and in it they called the arrests, quote, more reflective of tactics of a government led by a dictator, not from the government of our constitutional democratic republic. And that I think that sums it up, right? But what we know is that DHS has the authority to protect federal property, right, including defending against civil unrest and vandalism, and the power to investigate those suspected of running afoul of federal law. That's unquestioned. But they don't have they don't have just this general authority to act as some occupying force in cities across this country, which is what they are essentially doing in Portland, detaining protesters by essentially kidnapping them in unmarked vehicles. Just think about that. I think it's important to know that this doesn't just make protesters less safe, but I think it also makes police officers and law enforcement less safe as well. And it's fundamentally un-American.
Yeah, there's so much to unpack here. For one, I have been one of the hugest like detractors when it comes to the the Patriot Act, but never, never, I would never expect it. Unmarked law enforcement, particularly deployed by the Department of Homeland Security, deployed against protesters, American protesters, for just doing what they have the right to do. I never thought I'd see that, and it's really like Tiananmen Square like levels of just government overreach. Like overreach is putting it lightly, by the way, but it's really disgusting. And I pulled this particular quote from their website, and it makes you rub your chin. So they are meant to provide an immediate response capable to emergent and high risk incidents requiring specialized skills and tactics. That is also terrifying as it is vague, because what does that even like what does that even mean? So you have task force pulled in from Customs and Border Patrol along with Homeland Security, and I also want to mention the guy at the top of it all, Chad Wolf, because I think he needs to be mentioned as well. So Chad Wolf is currently the acting secretary of Department of Homeland Security. He was chief of staff under Kristen Nielsen, and you may know him for his greatest hit, the family separation policy. So this is what this guy's about, and but now they're turning their forces on American citizens. I never thought I'd see the day, and it's crazy to imagine.
It really is. I mean, just think about talk about shirking the rule of law, right? I mean, this is the fundamental obligation of the U.S. president, is to make sure that laws are upheld and not to break them in turn, right? Like he
Mm.
literally is doing. I mean, denying these protesters due process by kidnapping. I mean, think of how scary that is. Like, unmarked vehicle pulls up next to you, and uh, people who who don't have marks on their clothing indicating that they're law enforcement grab you and put you into an unmarked vehicle and whisked you away. Like, what do you? I
Like
would. I think I would react violently to that.
exactly. I'm glad you mentioned that because that's the scariest part. So these people have been given carte blanche to use authority when deemed necessary. So you have someone pulling up on you unmarked, and they're basically without warning forcing you to comply. You're gonna look like, okay, who is this? Like, who is this trying to put me in the back of a car? So of course you're gonna react violently. But the moment you do that, they have justification to react in whatever way they deem possible. So it's just dangerous. And I'm glad to see Oregon's leadership speaking out against this. But I, I like I said, I never thought I'd see the day. There have been some crazy things coming out of this administration, but this is by far the thing I didn't expect to see, and I expected to see a lot from this administration. Um, but one thing that we can expect to see, we've been talking about this for 3 weeks now. The second round of stimulus seems possible now, but it may come with some stipulations. Um, there are a lot of things being tossed around, like another round of PPP loans because that went so great the first time. Um, there's still things being discussed, like the $40,000 salary cap. So, Brandon, once again, I feel like we asked you this the first episode you were on. We asked you the following episode. So, with this second round of stimulus, what needs to be done? What's the ideal level of of stimulus that can be given to the American people right now?
That's such a tough question, because for me, it all boils down to what the American people need, right? Like, I
Mm,
I don't think it should be there should be a cap placed on the amount of money one makes, more than whether you still have a job, right? I work every single day. My job is remote. I don't have to go into a building, expose myself to other people. or expose people to anything that I might be carrying, right? So I'm still receiving a paycheck every 2 weeks. Not every American is,
Mm.
and I think those are the people who really need it. People who can't afford to um, uh, can't afford food, or can't afford their rents. And I think it's little, to say the least, I think it's a little too late. The first round of stimulus went out months ago, and it was
Mm.
only, or it's capped at $1,200. Um, Suffice it to say that that has been gone
Yes.
time ago, right? And so I think it's important for our leaders to start thinking seriously and not playing politics with this, but thinking seriously about how to ensure that the American people are thriving during this time and not just scraping by. Um, I don't know what that looks like. I don't even profess to be an expert on this subject, but I know for damn sure that that $1,200 over uh, months in in a pandemic is not enough. And so, in much the same way we are so willing to give um, blank checks to Wall Street when it's time, when they need bailing out,
Mm.
it's time to think about Main Street in the same way and not be ashamed of it.
Yeah, I mean, hindsight is 2020, but I mean, no pun intended there. But at the same time, I feel like we have enough information to say this. Often when I'm talking to people and they are arguing against welfare services, social services that the government should provide, my main argument is always you do it because it's a deterrent. It's a crime deterrent, it's a deterrent in other areas.
Yep.
So just imagine a world where we gave people, citizens of this country, monthly checks to stay home. Just imagine where we would be now. It has worked in other countries, right? It has worked in other countries. So to basically we force people back to work. Cases rose, and then now we're looking at it like, maybe we open up too soon. Like, yeah, you think so? It's yeah. 2020 has been an amazing year, and I say that with full sarcasm, but but yeah, that's all we have today, everybody. Like I said, it was a pretty short episode, but I feel like we got a lot of things out the way. Also, we with the latest news that came out today, well, not today, excuse me, last week, with the absentee voting. I will say this: we may have some resources coming your way, and if you're interested in those, we can, uh, give those resources to you, allow you to disseminate them however you choose. But basically, we want to make sure people are educated heading to the polls November, and we feel like that starts now. So I just want to say we have some resources coming your way. Just be on the lookout for those. And that's all I got. Brandon, you got any closing remarks?
Closing remarks. I want to remind y'all of the key dates that I discussed earlier. October 19th, last day to register for the general election. October 29th, last day to vote absentee for the general election. And November 3rd, we need to oust Donald Trump.
Yes, yes.
General election day. Don't forget it.
Please don't forget it. Because this year alone has been enough to say enough. Like
Yeah.
this year alone. So like, don't lose sight of the main purpose here. Like, this country needs to be back on track. And Ryan gives his speech all the time. Once again, Ryan published a great video. When heading to the polls in November, remember, you are not voting for a particular person. You are voting for you're voting for an administration, you're voting for a team, you're voting for policies, you're voting for basically Supreme Court seats, you're voting for, judges. Like, it's not just one single person you're voting for. Keep those things in mind. Also keep in mind how all of those things I mentioned have been stripped away these past few years, or going in a direction we don't need. So just keep that in mind. And everybody, make sure you're staying safe. Try to stay sane. As usual, if you haven't subscribed to the Kids Wear Crowns, do so right now. If you're watching this on Facebook, go to our YouTube page and subscribe there. And thank you for watching on Facebook, by the way. Somebody Somebody gave us a like. Thank you. But until next time, we'll see you. Don't know when Ryan's gonna be back, but he should be back shortly. But we'll see you. Thanks for joining us.
Peace.